Let's see. So thinking about the last couple of sessions, we've gone through, once we got into digital, we went through gates, logic gates, number conversions, different numbering systems, binary, octal, hex. We got into flip-flops and even data communication. And so we're shifting gears again. And now we're taking a look at the computer side of things. And I know there are some basic computer questions that are asked on the TKT. And so we're going to go over some of the basic. We're going to keep it basic, makeup of a computer, and then look at there's some operating system questions on there. So we're going to look a little bit at Windows 10. We got 2 PowerPoints we'll go through tonight, basic computer and Windows 10. And then we'll also take a look at some videos, but it'll, definitely in terms of complexity, shifting gears again. And, things are, I think, going to be easier to grasp and to, some of these things are, you already, I'm sure, are well aware. So just shifting gears slightly just to make sure we get all the material that we need to cover for the TKT. Before we dive in, anybody have any questions, anything you want to address before we get started? Okay, great. Well, then let's dive in. We'll pull up this presentation.
What we eating? I'm hungry. No, you gotta eat. Oh, this because y'all eat PF Change, you're not hungry. Is that what it is?
You guys see the PowerPoint basic computer?
Yes.
Yeah, it's on there.
Great. And I assumed it changed to the learning objectives.
No. No.
It did not?
Basic computer.
It just shows basic computer. It shows the sessions.
Okay. So let me share that again then. Every once in a while, it'll do that. You see learning objectives now?
Now I do.
Yeah,
Okay.
it came up.
See if you see it change. The change for you?
Yeah.
Okay, good deal. All right, so like I said, we're going to start talking about computers tonight. It's hard to believe, but we don't have many more sessions left. We've got 3 more sessions, Monday, Wednesday, and then next Monday would be session 12. And so we're coming down to the end here. We're at the last 75%, here in the next week. You guys, I mentioned early on in the course, you have access to the material. So certainly if you continue studying, if you run into anything as we make it beyond next Monday, still let me know if you have any problems, and I'll be able to help you out as you continue through the course and continue studying, because obviously you're not going to have your TKT exam immediately as soon as this course ends. So you'll be able to use it.
Go
ahead.
How long after next week's class ends will we have access to the learning objectives?
So I'll give you the date or not necessarily the date, but the time frame that I've been told, you should have access for a year. So you'll be able to go back for a year and review some of this material. Now, with that being said, something did happen, and we had some folks that were unable to access the material who had gone through the previous courses. And as those folks reach out and identify that they're having challenges accessing the material, we're reinstating those folks. I don't know what happened with the servers, but evidently there was some issue. So, but you should have access for a year. And if you find out that you don't have access, let's say that you have, a holiday break, you come back in January, and I got no doubt you'll have access then. But if for some reason you don't have access and it's within the next year, let me know, and I will let our tech team know, and they'll just set you back up. Right? They'll give you access to the course material. So you should have access to all of this for an entire year to continue to review. Now the best practices, it's not in your best interest to wait that long. Since we've gone through all of this material, by the end of next Monday, we've gone through all this material. And while some of it may not be as fresh as you would like, my advice would be to schedule that test as close as you can. Give yourself maybe a little bit of time to review, but don't push it out too far, because the longer you push it out, the more difficult it's going to be to hang on to some of the topics that we talked about. And right now, I think you would be surprised if you took the assessment now, how much you're able to still connect to, even though we have gone through, some of the information we've gone through was, 5 weeks ago. So don't push it off too far. You're going to have access to this material, but don't push it off too far. It's only going to make it harder on you. Good question. So looking at what we're going to try to accomplish in this first PowerPoint, we're going to talk about the basics of a computer. Thinking about a basic computer that we're all accustomed to using, and those different components and the importance of those components, and how those components fit together, and really just being able to understand the purpose, right? We're not going to be diving, even though we'll see some model numbers and we'll see some different abbreviations. Typically the feedback I've heard on the TKT, it's not that they are expecting you to know detailed model number for power supplies, for example. They're wanting you to be able to identify the big blocks of a basic computer and understand how all of those components are necessary in order to function the way computers function today, and really how they've changed how work happens, how life happens, and how we communicate. So we're going to take a look at CPU. We're going to look at memory. We're going to look at the motherboard, output devices like a monitor, disk drives, power supply, video card, NICs. All of those different components we're going to talk about at some point in time. It's funny that one of the most important pieces, especially if you're going to build your own computer, one of the most important pieces is the case. And it's not so much that the case has this great functionality that you need, but it really, your case determines a lot of how your computer is going to be built, right? I mean, there's just, when we look at these different cases, not everything is designed to go in every case. And so you have to know what you're thinking you want, and then start identifying what we're going to call a form factor, that physical look, the design of the case. And you guys think about computers, how they've changed how that case, that look has changed over the years, over the decades. We went from, you got the big towers that, you would sit in, off the desk. We went to, I can remember I guess it was the HP that went to the horizontal case that you see there. You've got moving toward a compact tower. And even now you've got these all-in-one devices where, it looks like a monitor and a keyboard, or it looks like even a monitor and, a lot of times the keyboard is Wi-Fi remote. So it just looks like a monitor, and it is all inclusive. It has, the case and the components inside of that all-in-one device.
Which is bad.
Well, why is it bad? When you say which is bad, why do you say that?
Because if a certain part goes, like say a video board, and I need to replace it, you can't, because everything's built in to the case and the monitor, and it would be more difficult, instead, whether you have in a regular case, having it separate than being an all-in-one computer. You know what I mean? Like replacing parts.
Absolutely. I know what you mean, and I knew what you were going to say. That's why I asked you the question, because it's that old that battle that takes place with any type of device. It's the engineering and functionality versus servicing that device. And it's great from a usability standpoint. People enjoy things getting smaller and tighter, and taking up less space and having more functionality. That's great, as long as you're not the person who has to service that device, whatever it is. If it's a computer, if it's a car, if it's a medical device, or whatever it may be. When you get called in and you have to service a device like that, you just got no room. And sometimes these things, the way they're put together, you end up in the end, okay, well, we're just going to replace a large section, and you replace more than you probably needed to if it was in a more traditional case with discrete components. So yeah, it's that constant battle between the design and the service. The person who's creating the design and the person who's having to do the service. It's the same battle between the architect who's designing a home and the builder who's having to actually make it happen. So it's that same battle. But you think back, and cases have changed, right? I mean, they've changed dramatically. And you look at those cases, and without having detailed information, you can look at the case and tell a lot about the use of the computer and even the age of the computer in some cases. Now, don't get me wrong, you'll still see full towers. If you look at some of the gaming computers that are designed today that are built to specs that are needed for play some of these games at and really microprocessors that are cooled in certain ways. We'll take a look at that as well, and extra video cards, built out video cards with cooling functions as well. And so you still have these other towers, a full-size tower that could be utilized. The big thing is just that, in terms of normal computer use, you're going to see it shift over time. Same thing with laptops, right? I mean, you see more of a move toward laptops and even toward tablets. And, you get into an area where it becomes impossible to service. And, it's at some point, with the prices where they are, when it breaks, it becomes disposable. One thing I'll say about cases, if you have especially a tower that you're going to place on the floor, it's always a good idea to make sure that you have that tower raised, even if it's just a couple inches, but have it raised a little bit. Reason being, you've got fans that are going to produce airflow, and if the tower is sitting flat on the floor, it turns into a vacuum cleaner. I mean, it will suck in dust that on the ground, anything that can pull toward it, it will. And so you open up some of those computers that have been sitting on the floor, and it's just coated in dust on the inside. And it's much better, even if you can raise it just 3 inches off the ground. You'd be amazed how much difference that'll make. So we have the case, right? This form factor that we're going to be aware of. We talked about power supplies and how the 4 stages of our power supplies. We were working through electronics and looking at the different components there. Every one of these devices, these computers, they must have a power supply, right? It's that process of converting the AC voltage that's coming into the DC voltages that are needed. And it's a variety of DC voltages that are needed based on the components inside, right? And you can see just a sample of the different types of connections down below. Power supplies are rated by wattage, which we know is power, right? Power, it's wattage. And if you were building a computer, you got to have not only the right connections for the devices that you're putting in the computer, but you also have to have enough power from the power supply to drive whatever is in the system that you're building. I'm sure we've all heard the term motherboard. If you open up a computer, if you take the case off, the motherboard is going to be real easy to identify. Typically, it's going to be the largest board. It's going to be mounted typically flat against the bottom of the case. Now, it's important to note, if you happen to take a computer apart and you're going to put it back together, when I say it's mounted flat against the bottom of the case, it's not really against the bottom of the case. There are some standoffs that keep it from grounding out against the case. And so that's important to note, because some of those standoffs are easy to misplace when you begin to take things out. And if you're not careful, you could have the backside of the motherboard where the solder connections are against a conductive surface, which, as we talked about going through electronics, that's going to create a short, not going to be good for your computer. So, that motherboard mounted, typically, like I said, toward the bottom of the case, or depending on what type of case it is, could be even to one side. But you're going to have slots in the motherboard where other cards can plug in, other circuit boards can plug in. And those other circuit boards could be a lot of different things. Here it's talking about, IO devices, input output devices, where those adapters, those cards plug in. You can see this picture here where it's got a lot of different IO ports, right? Everything from display to USB, Ethernet, or audio jacks, all of those different connections. Well, usually when you look at the motherboard, you'll have either options on the motherboard, or there'll be an adapter that will be plugged in, and then it will have access to through the case to the outside, so that you can plug these IO devices into these expansion slots, right? Now, CPU, we're familiar with the central processing unit. This is where, as it states, central processing is where a lot of processing takes place. And so this is the microprocessor that is going to be doing much of the calculations that are, taking place. The instructions that are taking place is handled by this CPU, the central processing unit. Now, one of the things you'll notice is that keeping this unit cool is important. Now, these things are designed to run at a certain temperature, and they run hot, but without some type of cooling system, it will run too hot and eventually fail. It's while these two things are not necessarily the same, I think it's a great comparison, just because we probably feel more comfortable, or may feel more comfortable. If you think about your car, your car is designed to run at a certain temperature. It's not designed to run as cool as possible. It has a operating temperature, and your cooling system will keep your truck running at the appropriate temperature. If it is too cool, it doesn't run the way it should. And if it's, if your cooling system goes out, that's when you find yourself on the side of the road, right? So, neither one of those, no cooling or too cool, is good. Same thing here with this CPU. We need to have a cooling system so that we can keep this microprocessor operating within the tolerances, the temperature tolerances that it has. Also notice that it says, it defines, it gives you this term system bus. All right, the system bus, this is the ribbon connector. And I say ribbon connector because it is a flat cable that's going to run to connect to the area close to the microprocessor to other devices. And that's how it's going to be, how you're going to communicate, that system bus, right? That would be a really nice TKT question. How does the motherboard communicate with other devices in a computer? Well, it's over the system bus. Memory, we can divide memory into ROM and into RAM. The difference between ROM and RAM is this notion of being volatile or not. Volatile meaning that when I lose power, I lose what was stored in RAM, right? I lose what was stored in memory. RAM is volatile, ROM is not. ROM, read-only memory, those devices or those instructions are burned into the chip, and even when power is lost to the computer, the memory is still there, right?
Basically, CMOS, right, would be considered ROM, right?
Yeah.
Or your BIOS. I'm sorry, your BIOS.
BIOS.
Yes.
BIOS. Yeah, BIOS. Absolutely. And so it's you think about BIOS, what's really going to get things moving, and those first instructions that have to take place, in order for the computer to boot up, those have to be there. And the instructions that are burned into this chip, even with absence of power, those instructions will still be there. And so that's why you can take a computer, you can run it. If you got your laptop, run the battery completely out, you don't have any power connected to it, it won't do anything at that point in time. But when you power it back up, when you apply power to it, and you can eventually boot it again, those instructions are still there to get started again. Now, the things that aren't there was everything that you had prior to that. Now, I will say this, and you mentioned CMOS. So one of the things that computers and other devices that are operate along the same lines, right? For example, I'm thinking about medical devices, or things that, for all practical purposes, have all the components of a computer. but you wouldn't necessarily look at it and say, well, that's a computer, because it has a different function, right? But what they do is they will put a battery inside so that it will retain some of that RAM, some of those instructions. However, and that's in cases where you need to have this functionality, right? But without that internal battery, once that battery dies, that memory is gone as well. And so it's still volatile memory. It's just the fact that what they do is they'll take a battery, place it inside, and while it looks like you've lost complete power, that portion of that device is still powered and can still hold some of that memory until you apply power once again, total power. But typically when we think about ROM, we think about read only. That's instructions that are burned into a chip. It's there forever. It doesn't matter how long the power has been removed. RAM is temporary storage. It's volatile. When the power is turned off, when there's no power, it's lost. Right? RAM, typically with motherboards, you'll have additional slots that you can add memory to. And so, that's one of the things you want to look at if you were, say, you were going to build your own computer and you were going to buy a motherboard. First, you got to make sure that it fits into the case, the form factor that you have. The second thing is that, does it have the expansion slots that you need for the intended purpose? And some of that is looking at how much RAM can you add to this motherboard. It says check the motherboard specifications for maximum amount of RAM that can be installed. In terms of RAM, the thing here, RAM is going to be, and you can see both of these would fit into an expansion slot. You can see you've got the connection down here at the bottom for both of these, this being dim, this being so dim. Notice that they are keyed. You can see this piece here, and then you can see a separate piece here. Obviously, they're different sizes. Typically, this is going to be in a desktop computer. This is going to be in a laptop computer. But the point is, when you go to look at RAM, your RAM is going to be keyed so that you are assured that you install the appropriate RAM for your motherboard. Thinking about those expansion slots and on the motherboard and what else we could plug into those expansion slots. You can see here I've got a couple video cards down below, and video cards, they have probably changed as much as anything over the past couple decades. Right now you've got processors on board the video card, multiple processors on board the video card. You can see you've got cooling systems since you've got those processors, and you think about what has changed over the last decade. What is it that has really driven the change in these cards, you think?
I would say gaming.
Yeah, I would say gaming, or the how many tasks you can do at the same time, like multitasking.
And I would think it
Mining.
relieves the computer from using all the memory, because the video boards have memory built into it now. So it would use
Absolutely
the resources from the memory card or the graphics card before it would use the computer memory.
Absolutely. And so if you think about, gaming obviously has come a long way. It's to the point now where, my youngest, he likes to play his video games, and you go into his it's not uncommon for me to walk into his room and not see him, because now everything's wireless, so you don't really see him sitting there with the controller the way we used to have to. You had a wire and you could only get 3 feet from the monitor. So he'll be across the room and you don't really even see the controller, but you just walk in, you see what looks like playing on a typical flat screen. And so it looks like the regular TV, right? Because you can do both. And the graphics look like a regular football game, right? And even some of the angles, the camera angles now, for the game, to me, it seems like the game mimics the real football game mimics the video game, and vice versa. A lot of times, I see camera angles that I didn't see in a typical football game before, but I saw on a video game, and now you see it going both ways. The point is, the graphics are just unbelievable, and it takes a whole lot of processing power to make that happen, and a lot of memory to make that happen. And you guys, as all of you said, the closer we can get those resources, instead of it coming into a network card and then going over a bus to a central processing unit, the closer we can get that processing and that memory, all that storage, everything to the input output, right? So we put it right on the IO card, the graphics card, the better off we're going to be, the faster it's going to be. And so that's really what's happening, is these things are continuing to advance so that they can be as quick, as fast as possible, so that those environments can be, more and more realistic. The other thing is, I think gaming's probably the most graphic intensive, so really requires the most processing.
So I had a question about so what's the point of the mining? Why are they taking all the graphics card for the mining?
Yeah.
Because
is that for another session? Is that for like a whole new?
Well, what I was going to say is, I'd love to be able to answer, more questions about data mining and about even Bitcoin mining, and I'd love to hear what you guys have to say about that. I'm not sure. My understanding is, obviously, once again, it's something that requires a lot of processing power, and you want to move that as close as you can to the IO, the input output connection. But yeah, I'd be open to more conversation on
because they say you can't find the graphics cards because everybody's taking them for mining.
Yeah.
I wouldn't think you need the graphics card for mining. I would think you need the processing power, because of the constant, because it's working 24/7 to just discover one coin, and it's going through all these this mathematical equation. So I would imagine CPUs you would need.
Well, and like I said, I'm not really comfortable or comfortable. I'm not really well versed in Bitcoin mining. However, yeah, it seems like it would be more process intensive. It reminds me a little bit of, back in the day, there was an opportunity to connect multiple computers, an entire network, to some things that NASA was doing, so that they could utilize processing power during downtime. But yeah, I don't know. That's something that I'd love to learn more about in terms of what's taking place there. I can tell you, I've seen some of those data mining systems. What looks like to be high-end processors, a lot of high-end processors with a lot of cooling.
And your electric bill going twice as much.
Well, and the devices themselves are not cheap. They are pretty expensive. So, yeah, that whole thing to me is fascinating. So you guys are mining Bitcoin, huh? Mining cryptocurrency.
Not me. I've heard my uncle did it,
Trying to
and he
learn.
told me how much his electric bill went up.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it doubled.
Wow.
I'm here to learn how to do it.
Well, we might have to add a 13th session to get into how we do that. And you guys will have to do some research to pull that together. All right. So as we continue on looking at storage devices, you guys are, I'm sure, aware of hard drives, magnetic hard drives, solid state hard drives. We're moving. What do you think that the problem is, or the challenge is, with a magnetic hard drive? That's
The plates.
that platter. What's that?
You just said it. The platters, the plates.
Okay, the plates. And what I was going to say is, that's that plate that's inside that'll spin, and we've got this reader, and it's like anything. If it moves, it will break, right? Eventually, it is going to either wear out or break. And you can, those hard drives, I mean, you can begin to hear when they're getting closer and closer to failing, and you better start backing your stuff up, because it's just a matter of time. Solid state, as we were talking about when we were, this notion of solid state, we talked about a solid state power supply. So we're really talking about chips, and you can see down below where we've got this solid state hard drive that's opened up, and you can see the chips inside.
And they don't have a modem, correct? Solid states.
No,
I don't believe they have a modem. Is that correct?
No, I don't think so. Not what we're talking about here, because this is actually connected via a expansion slot. We think about other types of storage devices and some of the size. You could be asked in terms of how much you could store on a typical CD, 700 meg, a DVD, depending on if it's single layer or dual layer, 4.7 gig or 8.5 gig, and even Blu-ray, right? I think we're all familiar with those different storage devices. Now, when we think about our input output, our video, going back to a little bit back to video, there's a whole bunch of different types of video connectors. Anything and everything almost that you can think about, going back to RCA, VGA. Hopefully you're not seeing that, and the Thunderbolts, HDMI. It's to the point now when I have to carry a whole bunch of adapters with me, because you never know what you're going to run into. If you're going somewhere to present, the chances of you running into a variety of these different options is real. And so,
Mike,
yes.
What is it on your display there? It says Thunderbolt 1 or 2, and then the other one says Thunderbolt 3.
Mm-hmm.
Am I not understand? Why is there 1 or 2? Is there a difference?
Oh, I see what you're saying now. Thunderbolt 1 or 2. So I think what they're getting at there, while the Thunderbolt 1 and Thunderbolt 2, there's some internal differences. The connector itself would be the same.
Oh, okay.
I think that's what they're getting at.
Thank you.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Monitors. Monitors, boy, they've come a long way. They've gone from just 10 years ago, either a monitor that would take up so much space on your desktop that you had to decide if you really wanted a computer or not, to now flat panels, LCDs, LEDs, and the cost of monitors has really dropped. I mean, it's absolutely amazing to see, the cost on some of these monitors. I'm sure you guys have all looked at monitors over, and even TV screens, very similar in terms of the resolution. And so when you think about the resolution of the monitor, we're talking about these pixels and how many pixels horizontally and vertically you have on the screen. These small dots, these small pinpoint dots. And the smaller the dot, the more pixels you can get, horizontally and vertically. And the more pixels you have, the more detailed, the more resolution you can have with the picture. Really to the point where, and I think some people are better at it than others in terms of picking up the differences in display resolution. I don't think I'm very good at it, because there's a lot of times I walk into a big box store and walk back toward the TVs, and they all look the same pretty much to me.
But if you walk really close to it and compare the 4K to the 1080, you can see a difference. Yeah, you can see a difference.
Can you see a difference?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I think some people are better at it than others. I think some people can make out that small detail, that like I said, the difference in display resolution better than others can. And so all it is, when we talk about resolution, and you see a couple of examples there on the slides, 640 by 480. And don't get me wrong, I can tell the difference between, a drastic change, 640, 480 to 2560 times 1440. I can tell that. But, when you get some small adjustments, it's even, to me, I really can't tell. But it's all about the pixel size, right? It's all about the number of pixels that you have on that screen. And, there's some things that are happening there that, like I said, are beyond even as that screen's being refreshed, it's happening beyond our ability to pick it up. So just be aware when you're talking about resolution, the higher the resolution, what that means is you're getting more of those pixels. Horizontally is the first number, vertically is the second number. More of those pixels means that you're going to get more detail in the screen, right? It'd be like trying to take, if you took say you took a 4x8 sheet of plywood, and you decided that you were going to make a picture by spraying dots with paint, right? You could spray a dot and do so many dots horizontally, so many dots vertically, and you could make out a picture, whatever that may be. Well, the more dots, the smaller the dots, the more detailed that picture is going to be, and the harder and the easier it's going to be to tell what it actually is. You get the dots really big, you're not going to be able to tell. I know that's an analogy that you're not out painting 4x8 sheets of wood with pixels, but you could see there, if I get a large enough dot, it becomes unrecognizable, whatever the picture was. And if I can get a small enough dot, I could create all kinds of detail. Same thing with these monitors. That's what's happening. The NIC, so the network interface card. Here, if we want connectivity, if we want to be able to take our device and communicate and connect with the rest of the world, then we're going to need a network interface card. Now, you think about what you do with a computer, there's not a whole lot that you would do with a computer as a standalone, right? I mean, you could have a standalone device that you would use to perform some task or whatever, but without the ability to connect, your computer is extremely limited. it's no longer as useful as it could be. And so this notion of a NIC is extremely important. The one on the left is, what you would typically see. You can see where it plugs in to the expansion slot on the motherboard. And you can see where you get your port, so you can plug in your LAN cable. And, there you're going to be able to connect to the LAN. You can go in at that point and, in terms of addressing, do a couple different things. You're going to have a physical address, a MAC address that has been identified by the manufacturer that goes with this NIC. And then you're also going to address that in a couple different ways with a IP address, so that, as we were looking, remember the video that we saw where warriors of the net, and they're doing all the addressing. Well, you're going to have IP addresses that are going to control a lot of that traffic. That would be a sender and receiver address. So that's what you have on the left. The one in the middle, it's also a NIC. The only difference there is, and you don't see those as often, especially now. But if you had a desktop computer and you wanted to plug in a network card, this NIC, but you wanted to be able to connect wirelessly, that's what you have here. You've got these antennas that are going to use RF to connect with your local area network. You've also got the possibility of this that looks like a thumb drive, right? You plug it in and USB NIC, and that could connect to the local area network, right? Connect to Wi-Fi. With the way everything is now, connectivity is key. And so, if you have devices, laptops, tablets, everything comes with the ability to connect. Everything's got Wi-Fi built in, Bluetooth built in. So the connection and connectivity is key for the ability to use these devices. Because really, once again, when we can take these devices and communicate and connect and use the power of multiple devices in connection, that's when we really take advantage of the network and the processing power. Input devices, you think about, as you're working with a computer, you've got to be able to provide some instructions. As you think about, this is an HMI, your interface. Well, how do you get those instructions? How do you get the computer to do what you want it to do? That's all those input devices, right? You use a mouse, use a keyboard, you could use a scanner, a joystick. The screen could be a touch screen. Barcode scanners, webcams and mics, fingerprint readers, all of these different pieces allow you to provide input data to the computer. Somebody have a question or comment? Output devices, right? Just like we have input devices, well, we can have output devices as well. And those output devices are really where, we're getting the information out. And typically it's in some format so that we can, share it, whether we're going to print it out or we're going to display it on a projector or a monitor even. We're going to, be audible over speakers, headphones, more and more happening with VR. VR is something that is, pretty impressive, and I think it's coming a long way. And then even not only VR but AR. You guys do anything with VR or AR? So virtual reality or augmented reality?
My kids play on their Oculus.
What we're seeing is more and more companies that are seeing opportunities to do some training over VR and AR. It's expensive, right? It's expensive to build out that capacity, but if you can create that virtual environment so that someone can safely perform a task and learn how to do a task without one, the safety issues, or two, all of the reusable issues, whether that be fuel or whatever it could be. The other thing with AR, the interesting thing about AR to me is that we're seeing some technicians that are using like a tablet, and they may go up to a device that has a QR code on it, and that QR code pulls up every manual and has operating instructions, including videos that show the piece of equipment, whatever it may be, in operation, and even how to test that device out. That's something that back when I was a biomed technician would have been, extremely valuable, as opposed to having to every device try to find a manual and thumb through a manual and figure out what the proper checkout procedure looks like. To be able to have that on a touch screen would be wonderful to have. So we got these output devices that are going to display whatever information happens, whatever the outcome is of the processing that is taking place, right? So those are the basic components of a computer. All of those different pieces, everything from power supply, form factor of the case, all the way through, each one of those different pieces, right? And so those are what you are likely to be asked about. What are the input output devices? Name 5 output devices of a computer. How does a
They're going to go over the 7 layers too. Are we going to cover that too? OSI or?
So yeah, we're going to get into the OSI model. Absolutely. We're going to take a look at the OSI model when we get to networking, which will likely be what we cover on Wednesday. But yes, absolutely. We're going to talk about OSI model and the purpose of the OSI model and the 7 different layers. They love to ask questions about the OSI model. All right, so let's shift this a little bit.
So many great people working outside in these tough conditions tonight. Chase Ryan, Barry Fairclough, Ray Long, Joe Over, John Lawrence. Conditions tonight. Can't lose, so hold it.
If you work with computers, you've likely heard terms like RAM, hard drive, and processor mentioned by tech support or others who are more interested in what goes on inside of a computer's case. If you've always wondered what the various components of your computer are for, but have never really had the time to look into it, then this video is just for you. While each one of these components is complex enough to spend a lifetime learning about, I'm going to give a very broad and general overview. A typical desktop computer comes down to these 7 essential parts: case, power supply, motherboard, CPU, RAM, hard drive, and graphics cards. These are the fundamental parts of any desktop computer. It may seem daunting at first, so let's separate these into 2 categories: simple ones and the more complex ones. For starters, let's look at the case. The case is nothing more than a big hunk of plastic that houses everything else. Some of them have more or less physical space, some of them have different parts where you can put screws in or this or that, but at the end of the day, all the case really does is provide a nice enclosed system for everything else. Next up, we have the power supply. This part of your computer, almost always located on the bottom, is the part that plugs into the wall and provides all of the other parts with the electricity needed to do their thing. You can think of it as an extremely advanced AC adapter. The last of the simple parts to mention is the motherboard. The motherboard is a wide and flat circuit board that all of the other components plug into. It's the part that lets all of these components send electrical currents, composing data, between each other. While not particularly expensive, the motherboard is arguably the most important component because without it, you'd have nowhere to put anything else. So that's it for the simple components. Now let's move on to the more complex parts, the ones that deal with data. The four main components to keep in mind here are CPU, RAM, hard drive, and graphics card. Now first things first, I'm going to establish some terminology. Keep in mind that CPU is also known as the Central Processing Unit, or processor. These terms all refer to the same thing. They're completely interchangeable. RAM stands for Random Access Memory and is often referred to as just memory. A hard drive is often referred to as a disk drive or storage. And a graphics card is also known as a GPU or Graphics Processing Unit. For this explanation, I'll be using the terms CPU, RAM, hard drive, and graphics card. So let's start with the CPU. The CPU is where your computer does things. It isn't really capable of storing very much data at all, but it's very good at doing things with data. Quickly reading it, arranging it, doing the type of quick and massive calculations needed to run your programs. This is where most of your programs are essentially run from. It's often referred to as the brain of the computer. I personally don't like this description because really your entire computer is just a brain. It's just the center part of your computer's brain. Basically everything that happens in your computer goes through your CPU at some point. Now let's talk about RAM and hard drive at the same time because they have a very unique relationship, which is probably why people often confuse the two. Your hard drive is where all of your data is stored. When your computer tells you you're running low on space, it's because your hard drive is almost full. All of the data that makes up your videos, pictures, documents, project files, or the 3D worlds and models that make up a game are all stored here. While hard drives can store lots of data, they're relatively bad at accessing that data quickly. Everything is accessed through a tiny little wire here, and because most hard drives are made up of spinning disks, your hard drive isn't going to be able to constantly give your CPU the information it needs to run certain programs. That's where RAM comes in. RAM is another form of storage. It stores the exact same kind of data as your hard drive, but RAM sacrifices storage space for nearly instant accessibility. Unlike your hard drive, which sends all of its data through a tiny little thin wire, your RAM is arranged in these long, thin sticks that insert into your motherboard. Think about a storage unit. If you have a massive warehouse with only a thin doorway, it's going to be difficult to get in, find what you need, and get out if it's kind of spread all over the place. You'll have to go through a tiny door. But if you have a long, wide storage shed that's got a big, massive garage composing an entire side of it, you won't be able to store as much, but things are significantly easier to get to. Typically, if your computer has 1,000 gigabytes of storage space in your hard drive, it's likely got about 16 gigabytes worth of RAM. Here's where you put the stuff you own but you aren't currently using, and this smaller one is where you put the stuff that you are using and need to be able to get in and out of quickly. When you run a program or a project file, your CPU identifies what parts of data are needed for that program to run, it pulls them from your hard drive, and then it stores them in your RAM sticks for quick accessibility. This is why when you start a new level of a game, for instance, it has to load. Anytime you see loading, it's loading the data that composes that level from your bulky hard drive into your RAM. From a user's perspective, just follow this rule of thumb. RAM allows you to run intensive programs, while disk space allows you to have more of these programs installed. It also allows you to have more of the data they're referencing, whether it be pictures, videos, or mods. And finally, we get to the graphics card. With all of the calculations going on in your computer to turn a bunch of numbers that basically come down to ones and zeros into a constantly updated three-dimensional world, the final and most important and arguably most difficult step is to display that on your monitor. It's possible for your motherboard to do this alone, but it's not going to look good, and it's certainly not going to be able to do much. Your graphics card is essentially an entire computer in and of itself, dedicated to the sole task of figuring out what pixels need to light up on your screen, in what color, and at what time. If you were playing a game that had a very busy and high texture world with lots of models and different angles and colors, your CPU is the thing that creates that world. It knows where the stuff is, and it does so with data that's been stored in your RAM, which was loaded out of your hard drive, but it's your graphics card that figures out what it's supposed to look like based on where you're standing in the world. Without getting too off topic here, if you're somebody who likes math, I highly recommend you look up fast inverse square root, which is directly related to how three-dimensional worlds calculate perspectives. So that pretty much sums it up. There are other components worth mentioning, such as cooling systems or internal wireless cards, but really those are extras. So to summarize what I talked about so far, the case stores everything in a physical box, the power supply gives electricity to what needs it, the motherboard is the body that everything plugs into, the CPU does everything, RAM stores data that is needed for quick access, hard drives store everything that you have installed and the data that goes along with those programs, while the graphics card figures out how it's all supposed to look on your monitor. Well, thank you very much for watching. I hope I helped, and if you have any questions, feel free to leave a comment, and I'll do my best to answer them. Liking and
All right, so let's take a look at Windows 10. And basically what we're going to do with our walkthrough of Windows is we're going to take a look at our start menu and the options that we have. And, you could even, click along on your own computer to see what yours looks like, because it's going to be, if you're running Windows 10, the same pieces, same components. Things will look a little bit different, obviously account information and things of that nature. But we're going to start with the start button. We're going to work up through everything that's shown there with the start button. And then we're going to take a look at some of the Windows settings, how we could use the search box, and look at our control panel and some other pieces. All right, so if we, click on the Windows button, the start button, so if we're down in the, bottom left corner, when we click on that, we're going to see the screen that looks, like what we have here, right? It's going to pull up programs that we have installed. It's going to pull up these panels, and we can move these panels around. We can adjust these panels, whatever works for us. Is really how we can arrange those. You notice that when we pull up the programs, we'll have the most used programs up at the top, once again trying to improve productivity, and then everything else is alphabetized. You can certainly scroll to look at your different programs, or we're going to see when we get to the search function, you can begin to type any program in, and it will immediately pull it up, so you can just click on it. And so if you look, when we hit our Windows button or start button, and you can see the options on the far left, right? So what we're going to do is we're going to kind of go up through these options first and talk about these options over the next few slides. So that first one, power, right? So we were here, we clicked on our start power, that power panel gives you some options here. Opens a power options menu, settings, picture, document, and this one that's labeled Dan is user account. Right, so those are what you're going to see whenever you first select the Windows button, the start button. The first thing you're going to see above the Windows button, right? So we saw that right here when we selected. You see, it looks a little bit different when we're looking at the whole screen versus this zoomed in option. But that's what we're looking at right here, right? Power, settings, pictures, all the way up. Now, if we take a look at, say we go the power option, gives us the option to reboot, restart, shut down, sleep. And those are our options with power. Once again, all we did is we clicked on start and then power. And that's what we see right here, this menu. Here I have selected the user account. So once again, to help you kind of figure out how we navigated, what we've done is we went to our start button. Power was the first slide that we saw, the options there. Now, instead of selecting power, we're going to go from our start button and we're going to select our user account. In this particular scenario, the user account was titled Dan. And so that's what we are selecting here. And you see it gives us some options when we select Dan, sign out. So this closes all open programs and documents. Offers you the option to save documents first and bring up a Windows login screen. Lock. I would recommend that you use lock often. Typically, you just, instead of going to this process to get to lock, hit Control-Alt-Delete and hit lock. The nice thing about lock is it requires a password for you to get back in. And, if you're walking away from your computer, it avoids, two things. One, it avoids someone that is up to no good, who is really looking to do damage or harm. But typically, I've ran into fewer of those folks than people that see an open computer and want to make an example of someone. And, especially nowadays when the focus on network security is so high, it's not uncommon to see someone who leaves their computer unlocked, and next thing you know, there is a strange email that is delivered from that computer to some other account, trying to make a point. So I've gotten to a habit years ago where every time I walk away from my computer, I lock it, and it's always a good habit to be in. Now, some people it annoys because they come back and they have to log back in, but that's okay. It's not that difficult. And my password is usually only about 25 characters, so it's not that bad. I'm joking. It's not usually that long. You can also make changes to your account settings. So if you wanted to change something, you would go to the start button, start bottom left, and then go up to the account name, whatever you had named your account. And from there, select change account settings. When you do that, you're going to be brought to this screen, which allows you then to select, what you want to change. Your info, email accounts, sign-in options, and other options that you might want to adjust. You're sharing computers, sharing a computer with your family or others. There's some opportunities there to make some adjustments. And then your sync settings as well, and what you're synchronizing. This is what we've done now is we went from, kind of keeping you in the path in mind. So we went start, right, the bottom left. We went to our user account, whatever it may be titled. Then we went to our change our info. We bring up this title. And from there, we're going to select your info. And so your info options, it's going to have, a picture here, an opportunity for you to put a picture in. It's going to have, information about your Microsoft account. So other opportunities to make adjustments there to your account. If we went that same path, and instead of selecting your account, we select email, it's going to show you the email account that's currently on the machine that's being accessed by the machine. And then you can add other email accounts as necessary, as needed. You can manage other accounts. If I want to adjust my sign-in options, once again, it's that same start menu. I go up to account. When I select account, I'm going to be brought to that screen that looks like this. And so I would select sign-in options. And it's going to give me a variety of different options to access my device. Could be password, could be security key, could be a PIN. The fingerprint scanners are popular. Picture password, all of those are available, could be available for you to use. All right, so access work or school. Once again, we're working through that your info screen, right? We pulled up our account settings, and we're access work or school. So we're not actually in the your info tab. We're below that. We're in our change account settings. And you can see here, you can go in and it says get access to resources like email, apps, and network, whatever you were wanting to access. If there's something that you wanted to, you had to set up to access, looks like through work, connecting this device and doing it through a VPN. If there's more restrictions on connecting at work, or connecting with work. So there may be some information that you have to put in there so that this device would then be able to access. And think about when we were watching that Warriors of the Net and how that information was moving, and it showed that firewall, and that firewall had, only a couple ports open. Well, there may be some other means for you to get through that firewall and access through a virtual private network. And that information would have to be shared with you by your work or school. And so you can go and connect and share, not share, but save that connection under this tab. Once again, if you're sharing a machine with family, sometimes it's nice to have multiple accounts. I've got this particular PC. I've got multiple accounts on this PC set up for other family members, and I haven't always done that. There've been times where we may access the same computer and we just use the same account, but since there's some different things saved on this computer, and I want to make sure that it's it's safe from any edits or accidents. We found it just easiest to set up accounts for everyone, and so that way they can set up all of their email, all of their information that they want to set up. They've got all of their browsing history and their apps and everything that they need, and it doesn't get intertwined with what I need on this machine. So it's a good solution. Sync settings. So if you're looking to synchronize, what do you want to synchronize? You see here that this is synchronized with this email address, palmerdew@outlook.com. Now, if I look at how I've shifted, so what I just did, and I hope I'm not making anybody car sick. I know as I'm moving back and forth between slides, I'm just trying to keep you abreast of how we're navigating through each one of these slides. And so if I go back to the beginning, right? And so we selected our start button, our Windows button, and first thing we did is we looked at power, and then we skipped up here to the top to our user account. Well, now we're coming back to settings. I think it was settings, right? So we're going to select our gear here, which I think we all feel pretty comfortable recognizing that as settings by this point. It's used so many different places. And so when I do that, it's going to bring up this Windows setting, this area. And you can see from here, I can select a variety of different options. This was, if you felt comfortable with the older operating system, this was the control panel, right? And you can still go in, and if you search, you'll still be able to pull up control panel. But you see, I can go in, I can take a look at my system, all my system, everything, display, sound, notifications, power, devices, anything and everything that I might want to check to ensure that things are working the way they should. Security updates, it's here, right? And I like working from here. It doesn't mean you have to go in this direction. That's a neat thing about the operating system, is that you can usually get to wherever you want to go with multiple paths. All right, so now we've gone back and we have selected our start menu. And remember, when we selected our start menu, we're only looking at a portion of it here. We saw our most frequently used programs at the top, and then we saw our alphabetical programs listed in alphabetical order. Remember, we had tiles that were over here a little bit further. And so now we're looking at, let's see. Yeah, they're just showing you that these are, these programs are listed. Most recently added programs are at the top, followed with alphabetical at the bottom, right? The tile displays, we saw that earlier. I can adjust these tiles. I can select the tile and it automatically launch whatever that tile represents. By default, tiles are sorted into groups, but you can customize your tile display by moving or resizing them, small, medium, and large. So you can really got a lot of opportunity to adapt that to whatever makes you feel most productive. Now, when we get to the search box, just to the right of our Windows button, our start button, was the search box. And you can go in and you can start to type anything and everything that you might be looking for. And this will begin to give you some options, just like any search, we're all accustomed to. It's really nice if you're thinking about a program that you're looking to run, instead of scrolling down through the list, especially if it's a program that you don't run very often, instead of scrolling through the list, you just usually type in the first 3 letters of the program and it's going to give you the option to click on it. Right here, looks like they did a search for the cast of Star Wars, and you can see that it pulled up web results for the cast of Star Wars. If Cortana is enabled, you can also use that. So you speak and ask for whatever you're looking to find. That is available to you as well. I'll be honest, I don't use that very often. I typically use those type of functions when I'm driving, but on my laptop, I don't find it that necessary. As we're moving across the bottom of the screen, we had our very bottom left corner was our start button. Then we had our search window. Then we had our Cortana, that circle, and then we get into our taskbar, right? And so at the taskbar is going to give us different options that are available to us. Typically anything that is open, it is there. Anything that I may have added to the taskbar will be there. It's got shortcuts to a file manager. So that's what this little file folder is, a file manager. You click on that and it's going to give you your file structure. So if you're looking to, find a file, that's your filing cabinet, if you will. They also made this Microsoft Store nice and convenient for you, so you don't have to go and find it. It's always there in case there's something that you want from the Microsoft Store. You can use your mouse and hover over any of those if you are not sure what they are. It won't do it on this PowerPoint slide, but you can, on the bottom of your computer, that taskbar at the bottom, you can see if you hover your mouse over it, it will open up. Will give you an indication of what is, what that particular icon represents. As we continue to move across the bottom of the screen, we get to the notification area. You see it looks like this. It's got a lot of different pieces that may be there. It contains icons for system functions, volume control, battery meter, wired and wireless network connections, antivirus software, other options. You also have the possibility of this up arrow. If there's more that can be displayed, more to be displayed, you click on that little up arrow and it will bring a box that will, it will open up a box that will show you the other icons that can't be displayed here. And this is a great way to, especially if you have something that, you say you have a network issue, and instead of trying to go through control panel, it's real easy just to go down to our, this notification area and open up your network connection, click on it and see what's going on. right? You can click on it and it will give you an option to for more details. Clicking the box on the right side. And so if we go all the way to the far right, we see this box right here. It's a notification box. And so we click on that and it will show us anything that is pending, anything that we need to be aware of, any notification message. It's a great place to go to see if we've been notified of any updates that need to take place, or if there's anything that we need to be aware of, right? So that's a quick place to just click on that and see what the latest messages are, if you will, with your computer, right? It will give you a number. Usually, if there are notifications, it'll give you a number of how many notifications. When there are no notifications, you hover over it and it'll say no new notifications. So device manager, this is an area where you can go and check any device that is connected to your machine. It's a great place to go to make sure that drivers are updated. I think we're going to watch a video and it will mention this. But if I say this just because of where we are talking about device manager, if you have issues with drivers, then by all means you want to update those drivers. But if you have no issues, if things are operating properly, even though you can go in here and you can look to see if there may be an updated driver. Let's say I'm looking at my display adapter, and so I click on it and it tells me that there is a updated driver, and so I could update my driver for this particular device. If you're not having issues with that device, I would say just leave it alone. Some people feel like it's necessary to go in and update all drivers when there are additional drivers to when there's an update available. But I just, if things are working, why fix it? Something could go wrong. If it does now, that's okay, because we're going to see where we can, install a restore. We can install a restore point. But just, this would be the device manager would be where I can go in, check these devices, see if I see anything that is, has a indication that it's not operating properly, and then also look to see, if maybe the driver needs to be updated. We do have system tools. They're not grouped the same way they used to be. However, we can still go to the search and type these in, and they are going to be there available for us. And so all of those system tools are readily available. All right, so let's so tell you what, we're here at 1/2 the hour. So let's go ahead and take a break. We'll take a 15-minute break, come back at 1/4 till, and then I've got a couple videos that we're going to take a look at that are related to Windows 10. So come back at 1/4 till. All right.
Recording stopped. Recording in progress.
Okay, let's take a look at a couple videos that are going to talk about some of the tools that are available Windows 10.
Howdy folks, in this video I'm going to show you how to initialize a new drive. So here I have File Explorer open and I could only see drive C and the DVD drive, and there should be another disk, but it just hasn't been initialized or formatted yet. Okay, so let's click on the Start button and just start typing in the word disk, and then space, and then start typing in management, and you'll get this create and format hard disk partitions option. Let's go ahead and click on that. And Windows, in this case, is recognizing that disk 1 here is not initialized, right? So there's a couple of options in terms of how it might be initialized. One is with master boot record, which is the default, and which is what I recommend you go for if you're just not sure what you want to do. And the GPT, if you know you're not going to boot up off of the disk and you're just going to use it for data, and if you're not worried about it being compatible with older versions of Windows, etc., you can choose that. But the master boot record is a fine option in any case. So let's just stick with that and click OK. And then it has initialized that disk, but it's still not formatted because we can see it here, disk 1 unallocated, right? So we can now right click on that disk and choose new simple volume. You get this little wizard that comes up. I'm going to click next, and you can do fancy partitioning and stuff in terms of only using portions of the drive for certain partitions, etc. But we're going to go for just the full drive being partitioned as one simple volume, so we can keep the numbers that it offers us and click next. And we can also at this point choose a drive letter, right? So what I like to do, if it's a backup drive, which this case is going to be, is choose B for backup, right? Otherwise, you know, whatever suits you, choose a drive letter or leave the default. Generally doesn't matter either way, unless, say, you have thumb drives that you put in and they're consistently coming up as drive E historically for you. You may not want this to take over that drive letter because maybe you've made shortcuts to those drives, or that's how you're used to working. So you might want to switch the E to you know, X or Y or Z or whatever, right? Just to get it away from the lower letters. So I'm going to stick with B here. Next. And we have the default option is to format it with NTFS. And here you can actually give it a volume label. So instead of new volume, I'm going to type in backup drive as the volume label. And you can either do a quick format, which means that it will lay down the structure, sort of the skeleton of a structure, but it won't actually go through and each sector of the disk and write out zeros or whatever it does when it's formatting. Quick format is generally fine. If you want to be more thorough and intense about it, you can uncheck that. But I would generally leave that checked unless you've got good reason not to. It saves a lot of time. And enable file and folder compression. If you were concerned about space on the drive, you can check this. If you know you're going to be filling the drive up and you want to optimize space on the drive, you can go ahead and click that. There would be a performance hit with that in terms of overhead for compression, etc. So I'm just going to keep the defaults aside from the volume label and click next, and then go ahead and click finish. And it doesn't take very long. Generally speaking, it's now formatted, detected as drive B. Here it says, what action would you like to take? I could have ignored that, but like if I click on it, I can say open, and here we are on drive B. And if I click this PC and expand there, we can see it in the list on the left-hand side. So now our new drive is formatted, it has a volume label, it's initialized, and if we go right-click, new text document, you'll create a test file. It's got 0 bytes right now, hello world. And if we save that, now it has a tiny bit of content, so we can see that our drive is working. Hopefully this has helped you initialize and format your new hard drive. Thanks for watching, and please subscribe.
So that's a case where we've decided to add a hard drive. He used his for backup. It's not a function that you're going to be doing often, but it's nice to know and to see how easy it is to find that functionality, especially using the search function within Windows. All right, so let's take a look at disk cleanup.
Hello, in this video I'm going to show you how to run disk cleanup to free up disk space on your system hard drive. Okay, we're going to use the search the web and Windows box at the bottom on your taskbar there. If you don't see that, you can right click and go up to search and make sure show search box is selected. Okay, but let's go in there and we'll type in disk cleanup. And at the top you'll see the disk cleanup desktop app. Click on that icon, and disk cleanup will start to calculate what can be cleaned up. Now, if you want to bring this, right now it says I can clear up to 115 megabytes. You can click on Clean Up System Files, and that will actually do a more comprehensive check. And let's see how much we can clean up. Now, there's 386 megabytes that can be cleaned up. All right, so let's go ahead. I'm just going to select everything here. This previous Windows installation one, you can see that's fairly large. Actually small for what it could be, but it's a big chunk of what I can save here on my system. Okay, and let's go ahead and click on OK. And we'll get the prompt, are you sure you would like to permanently delete these files? Go ahead and click on Delete Files. And voila, we've saved that much room on our hard drive. Or restored that much room anyway. Now if we run it again, we can look at the additional options. Click on Clean Up System Files again. Okay, and once you've clicked on that, we have the More Options tab here. Okay, so you can remove programs and features. I won't get into that. That's sort of beyond the scope of this tutorial. But if there are applications, etc., that you'd like to remove, and you know you do, you can go in there for sure. But what I wanted to show you here was the System Restore and Shadow Copies area. So in some editions of Windows, it points out a lot of room can be used up with these features. We can go ahead and click on Cleanup and click Delete, and that will clean up the restore points, shadow copies, etc. to a minimum, right? It won't kill the last one, last restore point anyway, but it will clean up a lot of the history. So, and then you can go ahead and click OK, delete files, and we'll be done. Hopefully this has helped you reclaim some space on your hard drive. Thanks for watching.
All right, so that disk cleanup, one thing I'll mention there, you saw him take a look at restore, system restore options. And, you know, I think we're going to see a video that's going to talk about restore. But when we are looking to make changes, or when we install something new, we can, there's an automatic restore point that will be set in place. 2, we could even go back and create restore points. And basically what that does is it allows Windows to say, okay, let me take a snapshot of everything right now, the settings as they are right now. And if something goes wrong, if there's some challenge with moving forward when we install this new program, or we make changes, or whatever we may be doing, if I run into problems, I can always restore back to this last known good. I can restore back to this point. And so that's one of the things that he was doing when he was cleaning up that drive, is he was going and getting rid of some of those restore points, because once you have a solid restore point, there's no sense in keeping multiple copies of that, as you continue to move forward. So one of the things that you may have to do from time to time is uninstall programs. So let's take a look at this little video about uninstalling programs with Windows 10.
Welcome to this video. Today I want to go over how to remove a program or app on Windows 10. And so there's 2 different ways to do this. And so option number 1, what you'll do is come down here to the Windows Start button. And when the Start menu opens up, you'll just type in Settings. And then you'll go ahead and open up the Settings. And then when you get to this menu, you'll just click on the Apps option. And it's going to list all the apps and programs on your computer. When you find one that you want to remove, you just click on it, and it will give you an uninstall button to go ahead and remove it. Now, option number 2, if we come back down here to the Start menu and type in Control Panel, and we'll go ahead and open up the Control Panel here. And then up here on the top right hand side, make sure that View By is set to Categories or Category, and then go ahead and click on Programs, and then Programs and Features, and then it will give you a list of programs. When you find one you want to remove, you just right click on it, and it will give you an uninstall option. Now, one thing I do want to point out, if I put both of these menus side by side, you'll notice that some apps do not show up in the control panel, but do show up over here on the left underneath the settings option. And so I would recommend using the settings option first, but just to make sure you've gotten everything off of the computer, just double check both menus. And that way you can make sure that you've removed everything that you want to remove or uninstall. One last thing I do want to point out, if you come across a program or app and you're not sure what it is and don't know if you should remove it or not, there is this website called shouldiremove.it.com, and I will put the link down below in the notes. But here you can come and search a program. You just type it in this search box here, and then it will let you know whether or not you should remove it. It will give it either a yellow or orange rating or a red rating. If it has anything but a green rating, it needs to be removed. So again, if it has a yellow, orange, or red rating, go ahead and remove it. If it has a green rating, you can go ahead and leave it on the computer. That's everything for this video. If you have any comments or questions, please put them down below and I will respond as quickly as possible. And as
So pretty interesting, the website that he had in terms of should I remove it or not, and should I remove it.com or whatever the URL was. But keep in mind when you're looking at, especially if you do it the way he did, where you say, okay, I'm going to go to a list and I'm going to see what I need to uninstall, versus typically what happens is you have a program and you say, I'm going to go uninstall that particular program. I mean, you go in with something in mind, unless you're just trying to clean things up. And so if I would certainly agree that if you're just looking through that list and looking to see what you can uninstall, there may be some things that you are not familiar with what they are. And before you just uninstall it, you do a little bit of research just to make sure that it's something that it's okay to get rid of. And at a minimum, you want to make sure you've at least got a restore point just in case. But like I said, typically, instead of me looking through a list to see what I can uninstall, usually it is, okay, I'm not going to use that program. Maybe I tried something and I no longer want to use it or whatever. And so I go into that list with a purpose. And I'm looking for a particular program to uninstall. All right, so let's look at this video on defrag.
Here's a quick video on how to defrag Windows 10 hard drive free and easy from nixcomputerfix.com. Okay, let's go ahead and get started here by moving our cursor down to the lower left hand corner of the screen and single left click on the start menu icon. And with our keyboard, let's go ahead and start typing the word defrag, D-E-F-R-A-G, and then we'll scroll up and click on Defragment and Optimize Drive Desktop App, and that opens up the Optimize Drive window. And by default, the C drive is selected, and you can click on Analyze or Optimize to manually start the defragmentation. Now keep in mind, Windows 10 has it on automatically by default. And if you want to manually do it, like I said, you click on Optimize, and then when you click on Optimize, it will analyze and optimize and defrag at the same time. So if you just want to do Optimize and see how fragmented it is, that's a step that I say is not necessary. Just if you're in here, just go ahead and click on Optimize like I did. Now this will go through approximately 7 passes and complete itself. Now my drive is relatively small, and it's not going to take too long, and it's not fragmented that badly. Now yours might be fragmented more, and it might be a larger drive, and depending on the speed and performance of your computer or your laptop, it can take a few minutes to a good number of hours for it to complete. Now once it's completed, you do have a message that comes back and says that it's 0% fragmented and it's okay to use your drive at this time. Now if you want to change the frequency of Windows 10 automatically defragmenting your drive, you can go over here and click on Change Settings, and then you can click here and change it from the default of weekly to monthly or daily, and you can also change which drives that you want to have automatically defragged. Okay, that's it for this tutorial. Subscribe and like my video.
So one of the things you heard there is the fact that defrag happens automatically. It used to be that certainly the only time you were going to defrag a hard drive was when you would request it. So it was a manual process. And basically what's happening in terms of the defrag is that hard drive over time, it becomes fragmented, meaning that information that is stored on that hard drive is spread out, because you can imagine as things are added to the hard drive, deleted from the hard drive, over time it begins to swell and spread out, take up space. But then also inside of that filled space, there are things that have been removed, and we've freed up some space for to save future things, and it just is no longer. It's almost like, here's a decent analogy. Imagine, well, if you've got any teenagers, imagine them putting their clothes away in a dresser drawer. It starts off right after they've got those fresh folded clothes. That would be the equivalent of you installing a new program, and everything's tight together and everything's sorted the way it should be. But as you work with that dresser, those clothes begin to get no longer folded. They're spread out all over the place. They're taking up. You got drawers that are half full of some things, but the related things are 2 drawers down. The matching items, whatever it may be. Same thing happens with your disk drive. The information begins to swell and spill out over the entire drive, and it is really at that point requires more processing and more movement to access all of that material, access all of that memory. And so why not once again go back and straighten it out, clean it up, get it all tighter together. And that's what happens when you go in and you defragment. You're taking the pieces, the information that has been fragmented and spread out, you're pulling it back together in a more organized, tighter fashion so that it's more efficient. All right, so let's look at Device Manager.
Welcome to this Windows channel, and today in this basics episode we're going to take a look at the Device Manager and take a look at what are drivers in Windows and in PCs. So to go to the Device Manager, what you'll do, you'll go on the bottom left and right click on the Start button. Here you'll go into Device Manager directly. The Device Manager is a list of all the hardware, all the devices in your computer, and also plugged on your computer. So for example, printers. With this list, what you can see is, first of all, problems if there's something wrong or maybe a missing driver. Now you want to have a neat list like I have with no issues. This is the best way you'll have a working computer that has no issues. But if you've got problems, usually you'll see that some parts might be open like this, and they'll have little icons. It could be a red X saying it's disabled. It could be a yellow question mark, an unknown device. Happens very often. There's unknown devices in this list, and sometimes it explains why some features that you want to use, some hardware, a printer or any other thing, a webcam, doesn't work. Maybe it doesn't have its driver. When you look here, you can actually look at all the drivers by simply opening the tab next to the driver. So this is display adapter, which is what shows the picture on the screen. And you can double click and check out what it brings up in in the driver information. So first of all, you have the General tab. This General tab, what it does, it explains to you that, for example here, the device is working properly. You got to be careful, because device working properly doesn't mean that the device is okay. An example of that is if the driver is missing for the display adapter, very often it's going to say VGA display, basic display adapter, or VGA adapter, or whatever. That, for a tech guy, I know that it means the driver is missing. But for somebody that doesn't know, it's still going to say the device is working properly. It just doesn't have the correct driver. You can also click driver at the top, and this is the useful information for a lot of tech guys. Why? Because you have always the driver version, you have the driver date, and you have the driver provider. So here it's AMD, Advanced Micro Devices. It says that my driver was installed, I believe, on the 3rd of August 2015, or this is the driver date. The driver was made on that date. Driver version. So this is a number that's useful also, because you can go back, for example, I would go to the AMD website, check for AMD Radeon HD 7600M series, and I'll check if there's a device driver that is more recent. Very often I don't really look at the version, I'll look at the date and simply take something that is newer. But once again, I have to say, when a driver works fine, don't check for updates. Some people are maniacs about updates on drivers. I'm not. I used to be. And what happened is one day I updated a driver and something went wrong and the computer didn't work well. So basically, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Don't touch any drivers. Even if there's new drivers sometimes for a specific item, don't update them. You know what? Just keep it like that. If your computer runs fine, I don't really want you to update, and I don't update the drivers. But if something goes wrong, there's also another way. You can either click the update driver button here at the bottom. It's going to search for an updated version. You can check the web. If there's a new version, it's going to install it automatically. But it doesn't mean there's no update to the driver if it doesn't find anything, because some drivers you need to go to the manufacturer directly to get. So you go, I would go here to the AMD website and check for the Radeon HD 7600M series driver, the latest driver, if I had display problems, for example. Some drivers have the rollback feature. So for example, if you've updated your driver and all hell breaks loose, you can click rollback driver and it's going to send you back to the driver you had before. So if something goes wrong, you can do that. Another feature that's interesting about drivers is that it is possible to disable them temporarily. So for example, if you suspect one piece of hardware is causing problems, you can click on it and click the disable button. What that does is that it actually disables that piece of hardware. It doesn't work anymore in Windows. And you can check out if, for example, your computer maybe is running fine after that. You'll know the driver is probably the culprit. And of course, you have the uninstall button. When you uninstall a driver, the reason why you want to uninstall a driver is sometimes the driver can be problematic. Maybe you have a corrupt driver. Maybe you have a driver that's kind of working bizarre. What you could do is try to uninstall the driver, and once it's uninstalled, you would go into the action at the top and click scan for hardware changes, and it's going to reinstall itself. Or you can actually download a new driver, uninstall this one, download a new one, and try the new driver on it, and hopefully it fixes the issues. One thing you need to be with drivers is smart. If you've got problems on your computer, try to think what driver will cause this type of failure. Example, no Wi-Fi, or Wi-Fi is buggy or it doesn't work all the time. Then I would go into network adapters and check out the Wi-Fi driver, check the version, check if there's something new. Maybe there's a new one with a 2015 date instead of that 2014 driver. No sounds working bad. You can click here and say, okay, speak. Let's see here. We got Logitech. Sorry, we've got Realtek high definition audio. You can maybe check if there's something new about this, something more recent. Try, of course, the update. So you can click and say, well, I'm gonna go into driver and try to update driver here and see if there's something new. Go to the manufacturer, check for an updated driver. Now, this is a very complex issue, and it's very difficult in a video to explain everything. But a good tech guy that, when the computer goes wrong, a good tech guy will often go see the driver and see if everything is okay. Basically, drivers are a little piece of code, little piece of software that run in your computer and explains to Windows how that hardware works. So, for example, if you have a printer plugged on, the driver for the printer will say to Windows, okay, send me the documents you want to print in this way in order for me to do the job and send it to the device. It's the same for, the display driver. The display driver here is telling Windows, okay, to display properly, you have to send me this signal in this way, and I'll display it correctly on the screen. It's kind of that little, bridge between that hardware part and Windows. And that's why drivers are so essential and so important, because they are basically the first piece of code that Windows uses to actually make your computer work correctly. So it's very, interesting to look at it, and it's very important that you know that it exists. A lot of people don't know where the device driver is and or where to look for. So knowing where the device manager is very, very important. So basically, that's the big picture of the basics of the device manager. And once again, if everything works fine, don't upgrade drivers. Just leave them alone. Usually drivers, when they work fine, are a great little piece of code, but updating a driver can cause problems sometimes. It depends on the driver itself. If you enjoy my videos, why not subscribe to my channel? You'll be informed when new videos.
So one thing I'll add to his comments about drivers, and I said it before, I certainly agree with him in terms of don't update drivers unless you have an issue, unless there's a reason to do so. One of the things that can happen with drivers, especially if you have a new device and you attach a new device, say a new printer, and you load a driver for that particular printer, you go out manufacturer's website, and a lot of times with a printer, there's a lot of different models, model number, and then a lot of different versions of a particular model that has different functions and operates slightly different than some of the other options in that same model category. And so if you have a new device, you connect it, you download the driver, and it doesn't work quite right. If a lot of times, for example, that printer, it will somewhat work, but not everything is, not all the functionality is there. And so you just need to go back and make sure that you have the correct driver for the model that you have with all the options that you have, because that often can cause that problem. If you think about what he was saying in terms of this driver being a piece of code that's telling this device how to operate, well, if it's not exactly the right code, then it's not going to operate quite like it should. So therefore, just make sure that you have the right driver. If you go back to the device manager, if you search that and you pull up that list of all the devices that are connected, there's a great opportunity there, as you're looking for what could be the issue with a particular device. That's a great place to start. But I'll second what he also said about some of those messages where you see this device is working properly. That is not always dependable. It may say that it's working properly, and there may be options with that device still that you have to continue to investigate. All right. Now, we went through our TKT Practice Exam and a portion of it. We didn't go through all of it, but a portion of it. And let me just share this so you can see exactly what I'm talking about. All right, so practice questions for the TKT. Remember, we started stepping through some of those, and one of the things that I did is skipped over some of the questions that were related to topics that we hadn't covered yet. The further we get in the course, the fewer sections that you have to skip, and so don't think that we've done everything there in terms of all the practice questions for the TKT. I also have another practice set of questions that I'm going to work on uploading here in the next few minutes. So make sure you're going through these practice questions. Also, the quizzes, make sure you're going through the quizzes as well. It's all, as I mentioned before, learning for you. It's not for quiz grades for me. It's all about you being able to understand and answer those questions. And if not, ask for some clarification so that I can help you out in terms of some of those questions that you might have. So we are, for tonight, the two areas that we really wanted to get through were looking at the basic computer and looking at some of the components of Windows 10. And so we are there. We're not going to go into networking until Wednesday. And so all Wednesday will be networking. And then network troubleshooting will be Wednesday. And then next Monday, we've got a section on flowcharts, and then we'll also do some recap on a couple topics on next Monday as well. All right, so you can tell I'm setting you up for some more time that you're going to be able to go in and practice with that TKT Practice Exam and also go through some of the quizzes. I'm going to stay here. I'm going to upload another TKT Practice Exam. I have to pull it out of another section, but I'm going to upload that so that you'll have another one of those to work with after. Eventually, it's going to take me a little while to upload it, so it won't be available in your time that I'm going to give you right now, but it will be available after tonight. I've also got a couple recordings that I'm going to upload, so you guys will be able to keep up on those as well. All right, so before I turn you guys loose for some time, any questions?
No.
Okay, very good. So I'll stay here until the top of the hour, but you guys use this time, and I will see you on Wednesday.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Recording stopped.